All right. Well, we are going to go ahead and get started. And first and foremost, welcome to you all. Thank you so much for joining us for August's edition of the Real World Parenting Workshop. I'm Pam Evans. I head up the marketing and development for Family Service and Guidance Center. As I said, we really appreciate you being here this evening. These are monthly workshops. They are different topics each month. So if if you're curious as to what the next topics are going to be, our Facebook page is always a great source of information, as well as our website. We do record these, FYI for you, and we put them on our parenting resources page, which is on our main webpage at FSGCtopeka.com. So you can always go back and watch it again if you want. So tonight is for you. Bullying, how to help your child deal with bullying. It is a very difficult topic. We want you to ask questions. Our goal is just to provide you all as parents, as caregivers, with some support, some help, some actionable tips that you can take away from this presentation this evening. We know raising a child, especially in this day and age, is no cakewalk, and we just want to be here for you. Really quick, in case you're not familiar with FSGC, we are a community mental health center. We're the only one in the state that specializes in treating kids and teens up to the age of 18. Specialize in helping kids who are challenged with anxiety, depression, ADHD, the whole gamut of mental health issues and behavioral issues. Lots of programs and services. Not going to take your time tonight explaining or outlining those, but the one that I do want to point out, because I've heard several parents in the community say, unfortunately, their child or someone they knew were in a crisis situation and threatening to take their own lives, or in just a completely chaotic situation. We have 24/7 crisis services available every day of the year. So if you ever I hope to goodness you never have to use it, but please know that is something that we provide right here in the community. So, and like I say, the website's great for all kinds of other information, details, but I want to introduce you to your presenter tonight, Mr. Travis Freed, and I'm gonna let him take over, and he has prepared a short presentation. And again, I'm gonna be monitoring questions. So if you have questions, use the chat box. And we will have time for questions at the end. So Travis, take it away.
All right. So welcome everybody. I'm Travis. I've been here with Family Service and Guidance Center for 15 years now. It is my passion. I love working here with the kids. I manage our crisis center. So we are here 24/7. We're here to take care of your guys' crisis needs at all times. We've got well-qualified and well-trained staff to help take care of that. So let us know your needs and we'll go from there. So we'll jump into this. This is the shortcut training / presentation to bullying. Originally it's about an hour and a half for this. So we've condensed it down to about 30 minutes. Feel free to ask questions as we go. I will talk pretty fast. Number one, that's who I am. Number two, it's kind of a time constraint thing, but we'll go as long as we need and kind of take it from there. So if you guys have questions, just ask in chat or raise your hand and Pam will direct them to me as we go from there. Also, kind of before we start, bear with me too. I am in our crisis center. We've been having some connection problems. I'm kind of out in the lobby area downstairs right now. So if I have to turn the computer away or mute it or something, it probably means we have clients running through, and I'll mute it for confidentiality reasons, just so you guys know. But I think everybody knows I'm down here in this little hole I'm at. So it seems to be the best place for reception. So each state has its own definition of bullying. Kansas does pretty well defining it compared to other states. It gets a B grade from National Mental Health Services. And this is what schools use to define bullying as well. So it's unwanted aggressive behavior that involves a real or perceived power of imbalance. The behavior is repeated or has the potential to be repeated over time. The key here to me is that word perceived. The perception of being bullying is entirely one thing that gets missed a lot, I think, by schools, by providers, by parents. It may not seem like bullying to you, but if it is bullying to the child or to the youth experiencing it, it's bullying. If it's bothering them in some way where there's a perceived power of imbalance, whether it's there or not, it's still bullying. That can come from an adult, it can come from another peer, that can come from an older or younger peer, a sibling, etc. So types of bullying, verbal bullying, we've all heard of this: teasing, name calling, inappropriate sexual comments, taunting, threatening to cause harm, things like that. Just a few examples we can run into there. Social bullying, this is really trying to hurt someone's relationship or reputation. This really bleeds a lot into the newer cyberbullying that we see a lot of. It's leaving people out on purpose, telling others not to be friends with someone, spreading rumors, embarrassing someone in public. From personal experience with kids I work with, this is one that's really prevalent. At the same time, this is one kids hide a lot because it's embarrassing to them, because they don't want people to know they're being left out, because they feel unwelcome, they feel undone. So the bully's having success in what they're doing. And we'll talk about how to address that and how to handle the bullying as we move on to the training today. Physical bullying: hitting, spitting, tripping, pushing, breaking possessions, stealing things, making mean or rude gestures, things like that are physical bullying. We'll get more to cyberbullying, kind of have a separate slide for that because it's newer. It's not as prevalent as people think. Cyberbullying is about 15% of youth aged 12 to 18 have experienced it. These are from those fun surveys your children have to do at school every year. To look at like drug use and bullying and depression symptoms and things like that. 33% have been bullied at school. That's a huge number of the population. A third of the children in the United States are bullied in school. The majority of it happens in the actual classroom in the hallway. It tells us we have a problem, especially in the schools. Most of this is occurring in schools, school-related programs, and we know that there's a lot of opportunity for it to happen in schools just because of the nature of there being a lot of kids there. But when you talk about a third of kids reporting bullying, we know that number's probably higher because we know there's kids that don't report it as well. So statistically, we're probably looking closer to 40 to 45% of kids have experienced bullying. Some handle it better than others, and some really don't. And that's probably where that 33% kind of comes in. But even then, 33% is just a huge number. If you have 3 kids, odds are one is being bullied. Almost everyone has been bullied at some point. I think this is a grossly underestimated number. Middle school, as we know, and we've all been through, is the most difficult time for bullies. It's when you're developing, it's when popularity really becomes important. What shoes you wear, what clothes you wear have a huge impact right now. And that is where we see the majority of bullying when we get into middle school. It doesn't mean we don't see it in high school or grade school, but in middle school is really tends to be that toughest time for youth as they're developing, maybe hitting puberty, or maybe not be hitting puberty. A lot more things to be bullying about as kids start to develop in different ways. Frequency, 23% of students report being bullied once per day. Again, we talk about 33% report being bullied total, 23% total surveyed report being bullied once a day. It just breaks my heart to hear that, to know that almost a quarter of the population reports this happening daily. About 20% indicate it occurs more than 10 days a year. Again, I would take these numbers with a grain of salt. These are from national mental health institutes, but at the same time, people have to report this in order for it to be successful. And bullying, similar to things like traumatic events and things like that, we know often aren't reported well. They're very underreported symptoms because people get embarrassed by experiencing that and get anxious, and it's not fun to feel that way or be vulnerable in that way either. So here's a figure from the National Institute of Mental Health. What this shows really is the age 12 to 18 is really what we're focusing on, at least in this one, who report being bullied at school during the school year. The percentage reported that bullying had varying degrees of negative effect on various aspects of their life. So schoolwork, you see somewhat or a lot, kind of those dark green numbers are really what we're looking at. About 19.4% of kids that were bullied report it being a significant impact on their schoolwork. About 19% on relationship with friends and family. About 27% about feelings about oneself, and about 14% on physical health. If we look at the not very much, again, those are kids who are probably trying to hide it, not at all. You're gonna see some of that as well. But again, these numbers aren't small. 27%, 18%, 19%, these are big numbers, and it's a big part of the population that we're dealing with bullying. And again, just keeping that general theme of this is underreported. So for us, as providers, for you as parents, for people in the community, not just for your parents, but to stop bullying, it takes a community effort. It takes an effort from everybody around to step up for the person being bullied and to take care of them in certain ways. So what we want to do, if you see someone being bullied or your child's being bullied, don't label who's the bullier is and who's the bullier and who's the victim. It's not helpful. It's sending the message the child's behavior cannot change is what that does. So we don't want to say, hey, that's a bully. You just need to ignore them. A lot of parents take that approach, and that's a bully. You just want to stand up and fight back or whatever it is. That's not really the approach that works. What tends to work better is finding a way to include the person being bullied and include them in more of the peer social influences. The goal of a bully is essentially to influence peers to make them not want to be around the peer that they're bullying, the target that they have. When we label, we also disregard other factors that contribute to the behavior, such as peer influence and school climate. This is so important because this is going to change from school district to school district, from community to community, from neighborhood to neighborhood, from city to city, from big school to small school. You're going to see that difference everywhere. So if you're someone who has to move schools and things like that, you're going to see different issues in different schools. Just from different SES statuses, from different educational statuses, from the population of kids, etc. So there's a lot of roles involved in bullying. There's kids who bully, kids who are bullied, kids who assist. Kids who assist are the ones we really have to watch out for. We'll get to that in a little bit. And kids who reinforce. The ones who reinforced are not directly involved, but give the bullying an audience. They're the ones that laugh and point, etc. The ones that assist encourage the bullying behavior. Once they started it and they kind of join into it, they'll join in the name calling, etc. They don't initiate it, but when we have those assisters and those reinforcers, that's really when bullying takes place and takes hold and makes it that much worse, because you get an entire group of kids now instead of just one, or adults for that matter, bullying the child. So that's really what we have to watch out for. We have to train our kids not to assist, not to reinforce, to stand up and not even be an outsider, but we have to be that kid who defends, to comfort the child being bullied and actively defending them. Whether it's verbally, whether it's just taking them and including them with their friends in the activity that's going on. What that does is it removes the bully's effect. The bully's goal, again, is to upset the child, is to push the buttons to get a rise for whatever reason, and we really want to avoid that. So teaching our children how to stand up to bullies in a way of, hey, you see someone being bullied, we want to step up and have that conversation with them to come join us in a different game, in a different activity. A quick example of that, we had a young girl who was here. She was 7 years old, and she just made us all smile ear to ear. The kids were playing at the library, and some clients we weren't working with that day. Two little girls were being very bullying to other peers that were here, to some 9, 10, 11-year-old kids we had as well in our crisis center. And the 7-year-old girl stepped up, and they were playing with imaginary cats. And the 7-year-old girl made imaginary cats of her own and went into the playhouse that the girls were not, the bullies weren't allowing them in, took them out and gave them to the other kids and let them play, and really found a way to include the other kids without really saying anything to the bullies. So these other kids developed their own group, developed their own game, and what it really did was isolated the bullies in that situation. They lost interest and left the situation. It just stopped. It was really heartwarming to see that a 7-year-old can do this. So know that your 6, 7, 8-year-old children can do this as well. It's not just your 12 and 13 and 14-year-old children that can do this. Anybody can. And as adults, we have to lead that charge. So who's at risk? Anybody perceived as different from their peers. What we often see: overweight, underweight, wearing glasses, clothing choices, being poor, etc. These are common ones, but it can be anything. It can be your voice. It can be a high-pitched voice, a low-pitched voice. It can be just about anything. If you're perceived as weak and unable to defend yourself, you're more likely to be vulnerable. Depressed, anxious, low self-esteem, less popular and have few friends, or seen as annoying or antagonizing others for attention. Again, going back to that, all these carry different contexts in different environments and can change from one environment to another. So again, you go from one school to the next, it may not have anything to do with being overweight or underweight, but it may be wearing glasses is the issue in that school. The bullies take charge and kind of define what that barrier is going to be in different settings. So children who are more likely to bully are children who have more social power. They're concerned about popularity. They like to dominate and be in charge. They have less parental involvement in general, or they're struggling at home. Difficulty following rules, they have friends who are bullies, and they isolate from peers, not press, but peers. Sorry about that typo. They may be depressed, anxious, low self-esteem, susceptible to peer pressure, etc. There's some continuity between these two, between children more likely to bully and children who are bullied. You see a lot of mental health issues in both. We'll talk about both ends of it too, because some of you may have children who do bully. And we want to address that because we have to address the bulliers to stop the children who are the victims of that as well. So warning signs of a child being bullied. Again, like I said, this is very underreported. So things to look for a parent: unexplainable injuries, lost or destroyed personal belongings. Sometimes kids will lose their shoes or lose their pencil or their backpack, when in reality they may be getting bullied and say, hey, if you don't give me this, there's consequences to it. Faking illness, especially if it's isolated to school or certain classes or certain times of the day, those are really big targets that we can really identify, being like, hold on, you're missing English every day. What's going on there? What's happening in your English class? Changes in eating habits, difficulty sleeping or nightmares. A decline in school performance is usually associated with bullying. Again, bring it up with your school and let them know that this is part of that decline in school performance. But as parents, if you start to see some of these warning signs, your alarm bell should be going off. Pay attention, because you don't know whether this is going to be a serious issue or not. But again, always ask. Always have that conversation with your kids about how school went, how things are going, because that's how you're going to find out and kind of break that stigma of mental illness, or break the stigma that bullying is not. We don't want to normalize it, but we want them to know that it's there and something everybody experiences at some point. Sudden loss of friends, social avoidance, running from home, self-harm, and feeling of hopelessness, and decreased self-esteem. So why don't kids ask for help? Again, kind of getting back to that theme, they feel hopeless. They want to handle it on their own because they feel like if they pull adults in, a lot of times they'll be humiliated, they'll be rejected by peers, it will lead to more bullying. And that's a huge fear they have. And it's somewhat a legitimate fear if we handle it incorrectly. If we handle it in a way that results in the child being isolated and being talked to about in front of the class or whatever it is ourselves, we've got to be very careful about that. So we want to go more that inclusion style, including the child who's being bullied or left out or whatever it is in more activities, and making them more of a leader instead of pushing them away and kind of saying, well, hey, let's talk to the entire class about why they're bullying this kid. Because that really reinforces the bullying behavior, because it also makes the kid more humiliated. It makes the kid feel worse. It makes the kid feel more isolated, and then they get rejected by peers because they don't want to be associated with that kid because they don't want bullied as well. That's a really hard, fine line to walk for kids who are trying to be the reinforcers or kids trying to help in the situation. So effects of bullying: depression, anxiety, somatic health complaints, headaches, stomach aches, things like that, similar symptoms of stress, poor academic achievement, and decreased school participation. Again, kids who are calling in frequently, a lot of times we see it as anxiety. A lot of times it is anxiety as a result of being bullied. Kids who bully others are more likely to abuse substances as adults, get into fights and drop out of school, engage in early sexual activity, and be more abusive toward partners, spouses, and children as adults if it's not addressed. And so again, we really want to focus on both sides of it. In order to fix this problem as a community in Topeka, we have to focus on both ends of the kids who are labeled as bullies and the kids who are labeled as victims. While we don't want to label, it's the easiest way to kind of do that when the kids aren't with us, if that makes sense, to kind of identify the two different populations. Bystanders are really what, and bystanders, the effects of bullying for bystanders, they also have an increase of substance use and an increase in mental health issues, which is really fascinating. But again, a lot of times if bystanders aren't participating or they're not helping the bully, or helping the victim, I'm sorry, they're still in a way helping the bully because they're not advocating for the victim. And that's what we need to find. We need to find these advocates for the victim to stop this problem from happening. It's not about teaching our children to necessarily advocate for themselves, while it is. It's about teaching our children how to stand up for other kids who are bullied, and they'll learn how to stand up for themselves in that way as well. They'll find groups of kids that they can be with and support. I think it's about us talking to them about it and having that good conversation about, this person is just trying to push your buttons. I mean, a lot of times if we just ignore it, if we just let it go, or we use humor, we can see it dissipate. So a big misconception is between bullying and suicide. A lot of people think there's a high rate of suicide with kids who are bullied. Media outlets report a strong association with bullying and suicide. These are not well-founded research. Most research from psychologists and social workers, you'll find not the opposite, but you'll find the same rates across the general population of any other diagnosis we have in our field, from depression to anxiety. While there may be bullying involved, bullying typically doesn't lead to suicide. It leads to suicidal thoughts, but it doesn't typically lead to suicide. Again, this doesn't mean that it doesn't lead to suicide. So take that with a grain of salt as it is. Can it? Yes. Can it get a kid to the point where they want to end their lives? Absolutely, it can. But compared to other things we see, it's not as significant as a factor as to suicidal behaviors as others. A lot of times you see other things such as depression, problems at home, and a history of trauma. What helps support youth being bullied? Ensuring safety, talking through what happened. Peer support is so important because they're getting bullied by their peers. Parent support is huge, but peer support and finding peers to support your child is going to be even more important because we're parents, we're adults. We were all kids at one point. Sometimes when our parents talked to us, it was in one ear, out the other. And while our children will hopefully be listening to us in those situations, it's going to come a lot more from peer support. We hope to start groups here for bullying prevention at Family Service. We do a bullying prevention group in our crisis center for kids when they come here. We have a no tolerance policy for bullying. It's not like the schools. It really is no tolerance. Even though we are a crisis center, if you're caught bullying, you get sent home. We don't tolerate it toward our staff. We don't tolerate it from our staff. We don't tolerate it from supervisors, anybody, from clients. If you're doing it, you get sent home, and then we'll work on you coming back. It's not like we're going to say you can't come here at all. We call the family and we talk about it. We get therapists involved. We get crisis clinicians involved, and we talk about how we can get that kid integrated back into it. What we've seen from this is a lot of those bullies become those peer support people. They become, hey, I used to be here. I used to do that. So let me help you in this situation. Surprisingly, you'll see a lot of support for that for people in those vulnerable populations who may be transgendered, who may be lesbian, gay, or bisexual, fitting that LGBTQ criteria. The youth here who used to kind of bully in that situation since we started this kind of approach and program have really become the biggest supporters of those youth when they come in and asking questions and wanting to know more in a very supportive way that's very closely monitored by staff because we know it can turn quickly. But again, it's been really cool to see that. And again, it's evidence that this approach works in teaching kids that, you know, we're not going to tolerate it. If you want to be here and you want the support and you need that break and you really need the support from us, you've got to follow our expectations and our rules. Well, our expectations and rules aren't strict. Kids are going to throw tantrums here. Kids are going to get upset. We understand that. But when we cross that line of excessive bullying, that's when we really draw the quick line and we say, hey, you know what? You're going to have to go home early. But we'll talk about you coming back tomorrow or the next day or next week after you sit down with me or one of the clinicians or supervisors and process this about how to handle this better. And the vast majority of the time we get the kids to come back in a better state, in a better mind. It takes 2 or 3 times usually to really meet with them and get them kind of what we're here doing because they've usually experienced bullying too. It's not uncommon for the bully to have experienced bullying. So cyberbullying, this is a fascinating one because it's tough, because it's persistent, and once it's out there and it doesn't leave. It's 24-hour access. You can do it any time of the day. You can fake stuff on there. You can put stuff on there, and all the kids have it. It's a dangerous form of bullying. It's permanent. Most information online is public, and it's not reported or removed. It's accessible by a much larger audience. So you're not just getting it from your local school, you're getting it from other schools as well. You're getting it from the entire population that these kids are friends with and their friends' friends and their friends' friends' friends. So always be monitoring your child's social media. I can't emphasize that enough. I know you want them to have their privacy, but it really is important to have somewhat of a connection. You don't have to snoop through it, but know what's being written about your children, know what your children are writing, because we don't need them adding to the problems of bullying, reactive bullying, just responding back to somebody, or we don't want them being bullied. But I really do think it's important to monitor that, to have some kind of rules in your family to kind of keep an eye on what's going on. Again, not trying to completely micromanage the situation and make it uncomfortable, but you want to know somewhat what's going on. And if kids start pushing that away, it's kind of a sign that something's going on that might be embarrassing to them or something they don't want you to find out because they might be doing it themselves. It's very hard to notice. Teachers and parents aren't often aware of it, so we need to find a way to be aware of it. We don't become aware of it until it becomes too late. until it becomes too far along in the process to really address it quickly. And then it's well ingrained, and then you have 15 people bullying one child as opposed to one. So when it happens, you need to notice and recognize there's been a change in the mood or behavior. Try to determine these changes and happen around the child's use of their digital devices. Talk to the child about what it is and how it happens. Document where it's happening, take screenshots. If you need to, get the police involved, take screenshots and talk with some of the police department. Call the non-emergency line and say, hey, we've got this problem going on. Can you address it if you think it's that excessive? The police do a good job handling those types of situations. I've had parents do it. I've seen parents do it and had good responses from most situations. Most laws and policies note that bullying is a repeated behavior, so records help to document it. So if you take those screenshots, you want to make sure you have those screenshots over a period of time as well, because that follows that Kansas law of a repeated behavior of it happening again and again. One time, Kansas won't define that as bullying, but if it happens multiple times, then you can get police involved and they can have those conversations with you to support you as well. And we can look at programs that the police have, programs that Family Service and Guidance Center has, schools have, et cetera, to help with that. But as soon as you catch it, let the school know. If it's happening at school, let the school know. Let the child know you know about it and talk about it and be open about it. What I was talking about reporting. Support, peers, mentors, and trusted adults can sometimes intervene publicly to positively influence a situation or negative or hurtful content posts about a child. We've seen a lot of that lately. I think as a society and a community, especially in Topeka, we've done a much better job about that. If possible, you want to try to determine if more professional support is needed for those involved, such as speaking to a therapist, guidance counselor, mental health professional, whoever it is, police department, someone involved in the mental health field, to help with that, to help parents cope with it. Because a lot of times when our kids get bullied, it's hard on us too. It's not a comfortable feeling. We care about our children, obviously, immensely. And when that happens to our children, we want to be there for them. I all but guarantee everybody that's in this training right now has been bullied at some point, whether as a kid, whether as an adult, or both more than likely. And so just being aware of that and being aware of how we bully too, knowing that we're guilty of this as well, that everybody is to a certain degree. While we talk about the label of bullies, we all do it. We've all been there and done things like that that's probably offended somebody, whether intentional or not, and we need to be aware of that too. So pay attention and be informed of your use social media use. It really is important, whether it's Snapchat, whether it's Facebook, whether it's YouTube, whether it's, I don't even know all the media systems now. I am so far behind. I can barely figure out my smartphone. So, but know what they're doing, know what they're using, because I've heard it happen all sorts of social media outlets. So for prevention, let's talk about it. Let the kids know it's not okay and check in with kids often. Know their friends, ask about school, and don't pass off their concerns. Don't pass it off as, oh yeah, everybody's bullied, no big deal. Have a genuine conversation about it. Kids who know what bullying is can identify it and stop it early. This is something I teach my children. It's something we teach the kids that come through our crisis program too, is this is what bullying is. We actually homeschool our kids, and we have a bullying class we do for the public. My wife and I help that with some homeschooling co-ops. We do a bullying class that we've put together with some other people in the agency and such. So it's something we really take a lot of pride in. We really enjoy doing it. Not that we're proud of doing it, but in the sense of we can see that change in kids that come. But we want the kids who are bullied and being bullied, that are bullies and being bullied, to come to that. It's essentially a social skills training, but really we have to identify it to stop it early. Directly and confidently tell others to stop. This is what our kids can do. Use humor. One of my favorite stories, I had a young man who was overweight for his age. He got made fun of for it all the time. And all of us know what the truffle shuffle is. So he decided to use humor. He lifted up a shirt and said, well, I'll just do the truffle shuffle then. And he did it, and he thought it was hilarious. Everybody thought it was hilarious. Well, maybe not the most appropriate approach. It stopped the bullying for him. And people started seeing him as this really funny kid that could really fit in and do that. So it's what worked for him. Not that I would encourage that necessarily, but it's what worked for him. Other strategies weren't working very well for him, so he decided to go to his humor base. He took it a little further than what we would like, but it worked really well for him. It was effective. So change the subject, have strength in numbers. Have your child find their peers they're close with and have 2 or 3 of them with them when that's happening. Go find your peers that you're close with. Go next to a teacher. Go next to an adult that will help you in that situation. Reach out to the person that was bullied. If you're not the one being bullied, include them. Have them come play a game with you. have them come and join a game with you. Not that we have to go and make a game completely counter to or against the bullies, but rather just include the person, hey, why don't you come play with me for a bit? If they don't want to play, come play with me. Even as an adult, we can do that with kids and make a huge impact. Even if you don't know the child, I can't understate the amount of impact you can have. Walking away is a great way to do it, and walk with the person that's bullied. Sometimes if they're walking away, if we can teach our children to walk with that person that's being bullied, the bully sees that as support for the person being bullied. And while that child might get a little arousing too, the bully kinds of back off because they see the support that the kid being bullied is getting. And if they can't isolate them, what happens is they tend to back off and they start to get isolated themselves a little bit. So once you get one going, you get 2 kids in there, you get 3 kids in there, we can start to change the momentum if we train kids this way. Coach kids this way might be more appropriate. Teach them to help others who are bullied. This is the best thing we can do. If your child's been bullied, if your child has bullied, a strong community is the best resource to stop the issue. But this includes us as adults as well. Teachers have to do this. Parents have to do this. Counselors have to do this. Kids have to do this. In order to stop this process, you have to get everybody involved to be a strong community. One teacher ignoring it causes a huge, huge problem. And that's why it is difficult in school, because you have so many people you have to get on the same page. For our program here, if you're not on that page, we will sit and train you and train you and train you until we're there. We have that luxury of not having 200 teachers to have to go through or 50 teachers to go through. We have the luxury of having 30 staff. And that's a lot easier to do than 200 people. Do's and don'ts: intervene immediately. Please, please, please separate the kids involved. Make sure everyone's safe. If there's a threat, get police, get administrators involved. Meet any immediate medical or mental health needs. Stay calm. Reassure kids, included involved bystanders. Model respectful behavior when you intervene. Don't ignore it and don't think kids can work it out with an adult's help. Don't teach that they need to stand up for themselves and hit back. That's not the way we do it. We don't need to fight back. That's not the answer to it. The answer is finding support, giving support, and moving on to the next thing. Don't immediately try to sort out the facts. Just when you're talking to your child about it, it's not important to know right away who, what, when, where, why. Get the feelings out. Let the child talk about the feelings. Let the child process that with you. And then we can get to more of the nitty-gritty details as they get more comfortable with it. Because when you start trying to pull everything out at once, the kids typically will become in a shell because, again, we isolate them. And they're worried about retaliation because they're worried about mom and dad going and talking to the school. They're worried about mom and dad going and talking to the school because the school is going to address it and they don't know how. They're fearful the school is going to address it with the bully and the bully is going to become more aggressive or whatever the situation is. So address it right away, get that information when you can, but focus on the feelings first. Don't force other kids to say publicly what they saw. If you see it in a group, but you know there's peers, don't call parents of other peers and talk to the kids. You may call parents and talk to them about the situation and may just inform them of what's going on. That's helpful, but try not to force them to talk about what they publicly saw because that's difficult for them to process as well and it puts them in a tough spot. Don't question the children involved in front of other kids. Don't talk to kids involved together, only do it separately. You get away from that group thing. Get away from that, let them have their individual thoughts because they will align together in certain situations. Don't make the kids involved apologize or patch up relationships on the spot. So now that we have run through everything, if you guys want to take a snapshot or look at this bullying website, it is incredible. This is a government website. A lot of schools use this. This is where a lot of this information came from. This is a absolutely wonderful website. It is filled with glorious information about all types of bullying. I wish you could just go through this and spend hours on this website, but please, please, please use this resource. I only used one resource on this because it's the one resource you need. There are good books on it, but they're all based off research that this website does. So stopbullying.gov, it is a government website. It's a safe and secure website. It is amazing. So please use it and we'll go from there. So questions as we're wrapping things up?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Travis. So I'm looking here. I'm not seeing any questions at this point. So for those of you who joined us, if there's something that, you're just kind of wondering about or some detail or, just something you'd like to ask Travis, because he does have, obviously, he has a lot of experience with this topic and working with our clients of all ages. This, like I said at the very beginning, this really, we want this to be as useful as possible for you all, and want to make sure that you get your questions answered. Quiet group, Travis.
Small group.
Certainly there's a question out there. Well, if yeah, while I haven't, Travis, been out on this website, that's good to know that you use this a lot and that there's a lot of real good, useful information, because I know when you're in the heat of the moment, or, you know, because we do love our kids and care about our kids so much, a lot of times it's easy to just react and maybe not thinking through how best to do that. So your presentation was really, really helpful.
Well, I hope so.
They're going to go easy on you. Nobody's typing in questions. Well, if you don't have any questions, Chrissy and Rachel, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We will get this posted on our website. It probably will be tomorrow under the parenting resources. Chrissy says thank you, Travis.
You're welcome, Chrissy. Thanks for attending.
Yeah, so we'll get this posted likely tomorrow, and available for anyone down the road that might be looking for some tips and some help with this. So Travis, thank you so much for your time, and thank you to our participants.
Thank you.
All right, take good care, guys.